Hey guys, welcome to the third, I think this is the third episode of the ATP Weekly Show that we're doing here throughout the clay season and then perhaps also throughout the grass. We are meeting just 5 minutes after the Barcelona final with James. There's also Vanj that is supposed to be, that's supposed to be coming in pretty shortly as well. Mario is out this week, but don't worry about him. He's gonna be there for the next episodes as well. James, welcome to the ATP Weekly Show.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
glad to be a sort of substitute for this week.
Yeah, maybe you're gonna be so good that we're gonna invite you more. This is like a test, basically. But don't feel the pressure. No worries. We're still figuring stuff out. Basically, there's no script whatsoever. We have nothing that we really follow. I know John wanted us to talk about the Madrid withdrawals. I wonder if we could start from that, because then I guess Vansh will come like for the most important parts, and I think the withdrawals are like, you can just sort of go about them.
Do you want me to read through them? Do you want me to read through them withdrawals?
Come again, sorry.
Do you want me to read through them withdrawals?
If you have like them in your brain on the list somewhere, yeah, I don't know, yeah.
Cool. Because I just got it up from from that great website Darts Tennis, which tends to be very good when it comes to the sources. So we can see that Djokovic, Sinner, Nadal, Berrettini, Cilic, Kyrgios, Nakashima, Bonzi, Draper, Yima, Isner, Brooksby, Coria, Kwon, Rinderknecht, Delalin, and Pereira are all out, which I think number's 17.
That's quite a lot, right? I mean, it's usually not like that.
That's a huge amount of players. I mean, of course, the big names are, of course, Djokovic, Sinner, and Nadal, but all out. Nadal, I think we've all known his injury problems and this up in the air, really, really up in the air situation he's in with his body, and where he feels he is when it comes to his tennis game. I mean, the fact that he's pulled out Madrid, he's pulled out, with Barcelona and Madrid, him being Spanish, those being two tournaments that you'd think he would move heaven and earth to want to actually get back into, or at least get himself into a fit state to play into. If he cannot attend for that, it puts Rome at doubt, which I know is one of his other favourite tournaments. And then, looking a little bit further than that, if he's not at Rome, unless he plans to play Lyon or Geneva, which we'd highly doubt that he'd ever play those two tournaments. I know Medvedev did it last year when he came back from his hernia, but this is Nadal, and that's another level. It puts the French Open at doubt, which is bizarre to say, given his track record there. And I know him and his team will be pushing unbelievably hard to get him back for Roland Garros. But if he goes in cold, would he be able to win the title? Of course, I know we're going really far into the future there, but we know a lot of people last year, given the poor way he went into Roland Garros, with the loss to Shapovalov in Rome, and the tight one with Alcaraz in Madrid, that people were questioning if he could win Roland Garros, and then went there and near enough cakewalked it. So, anything's possible when it comes to Nadal there. So that's a big one. Djokovic, I know, leading into what happened in Banja Luka this week, his arm, or at least when it comes to his elbow, doesn't seem to have actually been healing that well. And he's really not in a great state when it comes to that elbow. We saw with the compression sleeve that he was wearing, not only in his matches in Monte Carlo, but also with his matches in Banja Luka, that he's clearly not. There's clearly a problem there. I mean, you don't need, as much as the guy who's just won the title, Dusan Lajovic, is a good player. You don't lose to somebody like that if you're Novak Djokovic, and that's going to be that's going to be another one where it's going to be, will he be able to be fit for Rome? That's going to be the next test. I know he's defending champion there this year, and he'll want to have a good run at Roland Garros. And then, like we said, the other big one, Sinner, I think that's more of an unlucky one. He's got some sort of like flu-type illness that he picked up in Barcelona, had to withdraw from his match with Vanzetti because of that. And then the final big name that we could probably state on there would be Berrettini. It seems to be he is one of the most cursed players on the ATP tour. He's something with that ab continuously keeps on playing up every single year. And with him now having to pull out of Madrid, and the way in which he had to pull out of Monte Carlo, and we know last year he didn't even play Monte Carlo because of that ab injury, playing up in the Sunshine Double. And again, does this then risk his best part of Berrettini's season, which, granted, is not the clay? It's when we go onto the grass. He's defending champion at both Stuttgart and also Queens. Will he be able to get back in time to be able to defend those titles and actually have a run at Wimbledon? See, there we go for me.
Yeah, 17. I'm actually quite surprised. I haven't looked at them. You're very right about the recommendation about darts rankings. Just an insane website that I don't know what I would have done. Like, what I would do without it if it stopped working. And well, yeah, you're right that perhaps in like the grand scheme of things, the only withdrawals that like matter in terms of who's going to win this event, it's probably Djokovic, Sinner, Nadal. But Berrettini, despite, as you said, being strong in the clay season, the last time he played Madrid, he was the finalist here, so I guess he still deserves a nod. He even won the first set against Zverev.
Yeah, I mean, it's because of the way. I mean, I know that for the Madrid preview for that to happen, but we know with Madrid it acts a lot like a clay court. It also acts a lot like a hard court in terms of the speed of the balls through the court.
Yeah, that's really good for him, of course. Yeah,
which means that it works really well for Berrettini as a surface, and it's the reason why Zverev is so strong there.
Yeah, and Nadal, Djokovic, I fully agree with what you said. I think by the time in Banja Luka, it actually didn't seem like the elbow was bothering Djokovic as much as it did in Monte Carlo. Frankly, he even took that sleeve off at some point in one of his matches. But if he is pulling out of Madrid, which especially right now, he pulled out yesterday, Friday, something like that, right? And Madrid, he wasn't going to play his first match until Saturday, Friday, something like that, right? That's I think how the 1.5 week Masters are organized. So,
yeah, I think the main. I mean, I know this is speculation, but I suspect the main reason why his team decided to pull him out of Madrid is that it's just more precautionary measure because of the speed of the balls that are going to be coming at him, given the limited altitude in Madrid. They're going to be quite fast. They're going to be quite hard. And could you end up accidentally inflaming a situation? Hello, Banch. Could you accidentally end up inflaming a situation with your elbow if you're subjecting yourself to that sort of force of ball?
Vansh, we started talking about the Madrid withdrawals because we didn't want you to miss the good parts. So the actual talk about the tournaments. Anything you have to add, basically, on Nadal, Djokovic, Sinner, Berrettini, and all the other players being out? I think you muted him yourself, or maybe I did that. I don't know.
The Nadal thing was not much of a surprise. I think, we've been hearing murmurs for a while now that, especially, I mean, it looks 50-50 even for Roland Garros at this point. The Novak thing, the elbow is a little bit concerning, actually. I think there's still enough time maybe before Rome to where, there's at least another 2.5 weeks and he's pulled out. So I think, I don't know, because with that elbow, how is he going to be able to hit through his serve and his forehand? And it is a little bit different from last year and the year before that, where he's sort of rounded into form by the time Roland Garros comes on, and then he really sort of peaks. The Sinner, did he give a reason for the withdrawal? I just know that he was sick and he didn't pull out of Barcelona. I'm assuming it's a continuation of that. Yeah. And probably just wants to be at his best for Rome. So I think that makes sense. And then, Berrettini is, been injury prone for some time now. So.
Yeah, if they don't get a single warm-up, I mean, Djokovic and Nadal before Roland Garros, that's when you have to start worrying a lot. Right now, we saw what Nadal did at Roland Garros last year without basically any warm-up, in that he was so awful and so injured, and then he shows up in Paris and wins it. So, but of course, he has been exceeding expectations for the past 20 years, and so is Djokovic, of course. So I guess we could just move on to the events then, since you're here, and it would be very natural, I think, to talk about Barcelona, which is of course, the only 500 there, but also probably the least exciting event this week. Is that true? What do you think, guys?
No, I don't think so. Actually, it was pretty much very chalky, with the exception of, Casper Ruud not getting there. But apart from that, I would have been very surprised if someone other than Alcaraz, Tsitsipas, or Sinner or Ruud won the whole thing. So that's kind of what panned out in the end, right?
Yeah, and we had Carlos Alcaraz just completely dismiss Stefanos Tsitsipas today in the final. No sets lost on the way to the title, so I guess we just need to sort of talk about let's start talking about the final. Is there something that, with Alcaraz in this form, with Alcaraz playing on clay, is there something that Tsitsipas should be, like, what could he do against such player? Because, well, Tsitsipas, we've always been saying that Roland Garros is his best shot at a big title. Of course, his Masters 1000 titles came in Monte Carlo. Like, what could he do against someone like that? And is there an answer to this question even?
Yeah, I mean, like his what he really likes to do is he likes to dictate play with his forehand, right? But the problem against Carlos is he leaves a lot of open space on the forehand wing, and it's a lot to defend. And generally he's pretty elite with his athleticism that he can do it against most guys. But Alcaraz is just going to make him pay and going to keep him locked in the backhand corner. And his serve +1 is better than Tsitsipas in this match. I mean, that already is a big red flag if you're Stefanos, that it's going to take something really, really special to fight against that. He was up on an early break in the first set, right? He was 2-1 up, but it didn't really last very long, honestly, and there weren't really many advantages for him in this. At the moment where it stands, there's not many advantages for him in this matchup. It's kind of like the Djokovic matchup right now.
But I would certainly tend to agree with that. I mean, Vance's covered it pretty good there. I saw some final analysis as well, which showed that, I mean, Alcaraz played very well at being able to actually keep sticking it into Steph's backhand, which I think was a key factor of this game, and it's a key factor for any player on the tour if they want to get any success against Tsitsipas. That backhand hasn't improved in the last few years, and when you're a player that is evolving and adapting as well as Alcaraz, you're just going to make mincemeat of that situation. It's going to be pretty much like another day at the office to be able to go right, hit to the backhand, get a meager return back to me, and then be able to be the conductor for the rest of the point. And that's what happened throughout the entirety of that match. Is what we could have all predicted at the start of the match, and it's what's happened in the 3 matches that have taken place previously.
Yeah, with how strong Alcaraz is getting to be on clay, and like probably how good Rune is probably going to be on clay in a year or two, it actually might be that Tsitsipas will now have to look at Australia. New York he's never done well at, even though there's not really a clear reason why, right? But I think he might actually have to looking for his slam chances someplace else, probably. Even last year he lost to Rune at Roland Garros, which of course back then was still a bit of a random result. It's not going to be random if it happens this time, and yeah, for Tsitsipas, just matches like this. But frankly, he also wasn't really playing at his best level all week, right? He was involved in a big struggle with Musetti. In general, the last couple of months have been pretty tough for Tsitsipas, so I'm also not saying that this was like the best he could play and that this was the form of his life, but then he just comes into the final and Alcaraz destroys him. That's not really the case, but certainly this final just never really felt in doubt at any single point. And since Alcaraz won it, without dropping a set, such a display of strength in Barcelona, who could stop him at Roland Garros according to you? Like, is there a chance that he loses there this year? I think this is actually a reasonable question right now, which might sound funny, but for a guy who's just gonna turn 20 during the event and lost in the quarterfinals last year, but he just seems to have a very clear edge over anyone else in the field at the moment.
I mean, certainly you have to put him as the number 1 favorite right now, just with the question marks surrounding Djokovic and Nadal. I mean, I kind of struggle to put anyone else ahead of him at this point. Like, it feels like those 3 guys are tier 1, like when, Djokovic and Nadal when they're healthy, and Alcaraz, and then kind of the next tier would be like Tsitsipas and Sinner and Rude and players like that, Holger. Like, Sorry, go ahead.
I would very much go along those lines. I think the only 2 players that have the talent and the potential to be able to beat Alcaraz at the moment would be Nadal and Djokovic on clay. They are the only 2 that have the skills in their arsenal to be able to pull off such a result. I feel as though if we had a final that was, say, Tsitsipas versus Alcaraz, it would be probably a straight 3 sets to Alcaraz, and it's weird because we're saying that I'm saying it in a sort of a vein of it's like being slightly terrifying to wait to be able to say that? We kind of want to go into events with a little bit of an idea of at least 3 or 4 different favourites that are going to go into there, and we want to see those that really push each other to every minuscule, I say second as an F1 reference, but as every minuscule percent on the court, to make it as competitive as possible. But at the moment, if we have a Nadal that isn't right and we have a Djokovic which isn't right, the only person you can see winning it would be Alcaraz.
Yeah, I actually think he might have a chance to lose against like Sinner or Rune, just because if they play each other, they seem to be. We've talked about it a few times, but when they actually face each other, you don't really see the whole difference that exists when they play the other part of the tour. Like when they play anyone else on the tour, Alcaraz is 100% better than Rune Sinner. But when they face each other, you don't really see it. Of course, with Rune, there's a bit less sample size in that. They've only played twice. But with Sinner, we've already seen it a few times. And still, they would have to get to play Alcaraz, which, of course, requires a few wins already. And they have their own question marks and etc. So yeah, it's just going to be like, unless Djokovic and Nadal pull up in Rome, they have a very good event. Coming into Roland Garros, we'll probably be treating Carlos Alcaraz the same way we do, I don't know, Iga Świątek on the WTA side, I think. And especially when you think about his tournament last year. He struggled with Ramos Vinolas in the second round. That's not really going to happen now, right? And I'm not talking about Ramos Vinolas specifically, just something like that, a tricky player. And he's coming. He of course lost to Zverev in the quarters. That's not happening. That's. I
think one of the key things, because I know you bring up about Sinner there, is that when you look at the situations in which Sinner has beaten Alcaraz, especially when you look at the hard court and the clay court, both situations, Alcaraz really wasn't at his best in both instances. You look at the one in Umag you look at Umag. He was coming back and he was really trying to make sure that he was getting some matches in before heading onto the American hard courts, and had a weird record where he was not playing well in finals at that point. And then when it came to Miami, he just come off the back of winning Indian Wells and then doing all the matches in Miami at the same time, that there was a degree of fatigue that took place with Alcaraz. So, again, if like a match took place in like the quarter, semis, or final that involved Jannik Sinner, I would still expect, as long as Alcaraz, all things being equal, and Alcaraz not coming in with some sort of bad element to it, for him to be able to at least win that match.
Yeah, my biggest question mark with Alcaraz is actually on the physical side. So not so much like the stamina or the endurance, because he showed that at the US Open. I mean, he spent over 24 hours on court, late into the nights and late recovery times, and still, recovered plenty enough, and then had to rely on his serve in the fourth set against Ruud to win the whole thing. But it's these little niggles and injuries that he sort of picks up in these tournaments, where, like, even in the Sinner match, he sort of dived for a second serve return, and then in a split second, he kind of, because he has that never say die attitude where he chases every single point down that like no human on the planet can even chase at times, even Alcaraz included, but he's always going to try. And so I just wonder, like, if he is a little bit smarter about that in terms of like letting some points go, like when he's love 40 or 40 love up or love 40 down and stuff like that. But it's really difficult for me to sit here and say that, because like those qualities make him like the player that he is, and he's like, you don't want to mess with like that psychology, and then that could have other ramifications like later down the line. But I definitely think like that's like the only question mark. Like Madrid and Rome, like will he be healthy through that entire stretch? Will he play both events? Will will something random sort of physical transpire like when he's trying to chase a certain shot? That would be like maybe my only major this thing. And then of course when he plays Sinner, like that matchup where we have a bigger sample size, but then like we've made clear, like Sinner, it's not the same against the rest of the field like Alcaraz is. He's really different in that step, right? Because Sinner is still developing as a player. Like Sinner still has physical improvements that he's making. Alcaraz more or less is already physically developed and very complete, right?
Yeah, even though he's 2 years younger, of course.
Yeah.
I forgot what I wanted to say, but you're quite right that I think that these sort of unbelievable gets that he performs, that incredible defense, even though maybe sometimes it's not even that smart, that's just part of who he is, I think. Exactly. And it would be tough to stop that, and it would also make him a less exciting player, I suppose, which maybe isn't necessarily going to give you titles, but it's good for you in terms of like marketability and etc. But
I mean, I think it's a really good point that Vance has made there about, is there bits where he could just let it go? I'm sure when it comes to early stages of certain tournaments, he could just let it go, because nobody's going to be, you think about, as you say, Damien, about marketability, or, and those shots being on highlight reels, have them for when you're playing Stefanos Tsitsipas, when you're playing Novak Djokovic, and you can really highlight those things to the world. When you're, first round playing, I don't know, I'm going to use that as an example, but if you're going to be like first round playing somebody ranked 90 in the world, you don't need to be doing diving volleys when you're 40 love up to try and get the point. You can just let that go, because you are going to beat that person who's ranked 90 in the world. You are that good.
Yeah, I mean, kind of fair. But the Carlos Alcaraz and Stefanos Tsitsipas were not the only players in Barcelona. Let's talk about some other guys who impressed us in the field. Maybe Dan Evans. How does he keep doing, guys? How does he keep somehow grinding out these clay court wins despite a game that should not work on clay whatsoever?
That is a very good question when it comes to Dan, because Dan's favourite surface is the grass. We know that the fact that he picked up the challenger title in Nottingham last year, that is a surface that he feels very comfortable on, and it's a bit and he, part of his game, of course, is that slice backhand, and that slice backhand works really well on surfaces where the ball stays low. What Dan seems to have been able to do, and what was quite notable in the match with Cerundolo, was that he was able to keep his forehand errors to an absolute minimum, and that's where usually on clay and on some high bouncing hard courts, Dan can be caught out, because that sort of high bouncing, those high bouncing those courts, he can be forced into a lot of unforced errors with that forehand, and then that reaps a lot of those issues. Dan just seems to have been able to have found a little bit of form quite recently. He's able to, use all different types of shots in his arsenal, especially bringing into play that forehand much more than he does on say a hard court or a grass court, and that's sort of brought about a lot of these victories that we've been seeing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we saw what he did like in Monte Carlo a couple of years ago, and then he went on a run on hard courts as well in Canada last year. But Evans does have some qualities that make it very tricky to play against him on clay, because he's so patient from the baseline, and because he uses his slice so well to set up the forehand. He has more time to also run around his backhand and maybe like have an easier time like generating offense than he would, like, let's say on a speedy hard court. It's like kind of a more even playing field, and then like maybe some days if his serve is not firing, for instance, he could be just overpowered by a lot of players. But on clay, he can definitely protect that a lot more. And I thought he did a very good job, especially in the match against Khachanov. He leads that head-to-head 4-0. And I kind of understand why. It's because he's able to really keep the ball so low and like slice down the line to Khachanov's forehand, which we know is like, is a big stroke, big wind up. He has a kind of a funky Western grip. It's pretty extreme. And so, and he's able to like draw players forward with his short slice and backhand, and then he sort of plays the cat and mouse points, I think, very well, and he has good IQ because he's not the biggest guy. He doesn't have the biggest weapons, so it's more about putting your opponent in awkward positions and then pulling the trigger on the right shot. And I think when he catches a bit of form like this, he can get pretty dangerous. But then obviously when he faced Alcaraz, it was never in doubt, like the result. You knew it was going to be very straightforward for Carlos to generate pace off of the slice.
Yeah, he definitely plays just some very smart tennis. And as you said, he doesn't have maybe the physicality of a top player, which kind of forced him to develop that. And I think that's how he's doing it. I mean, he's very scrappy. He just knows what to do to make the opponents uncomfortable, and that's been getting him quite
a good
good
competitor,
wins
I think. Yeah, quite like as a competitor, he's very steely and feisty, and
because of like his attitude. Sometimes people tend to think that he's actually not a good competitor, right? But that's not really the case. Yeah. I would totally agree with that. And we also had Lorenzo Musetti make a very good run. Once again, after Monte Carlo, is there something that has woken up in Lorenzo Musetti? How far do you see this taking him? Sort of, that momentum from Monte Carlo and Barcelona.
I think Madrid is going to be a little tougher for him, just with the altitude. He doesn't tend to do very well in altitude conditions. Obviously, doesn't get the most out of his sort of at this point, I'm wondering to see just how quickly he sort of improves that, so he can get a little better on the other surfaces as well. And yeah, I mean, Musetti is such a fun player to watch. Obviously, with the variety that he has in his game and the amount of things he can do with his backhand, but also his forehand, he just gets a lot more time, and he's running around a lot more backhands, especially, particularly in the Tsitsipas match. And he has just so many tools in his arsenal. And he was a little lucky, I would say, to get to the semis here. I mean, he didn't have to play Sinner again, so I think that definitely helped him out a little bit, just because of the match in Monte Carlo. I think that was pretty one-sided for Sinners. But I think he's still sort of carried that form over from Monte Carlo, and it's a positive result, because he had a very poor start to the year, as we know. I mean, he had just one win against a top 100 player until Monte Carlo, basically. So I'm wondering to see what he can do in Rome with the Italian crowd, and that's where he kind of first announced himself, right, in 2020 in the fall, where he picked up those wins against Wawrinka and Nishikori, and then people were talking about him as a dark horse into Roland Garros those couple of editions. So I think he's sort of back on track, would you say, more or less?
I would certainly say that the inconsistency, and looking into the future, the inconsistency is going to be the key thing that he's going to have to get control over, because as we see, when he is on it, and he, I think that the Hamburg final of last year, I think is a major showing of when he is on, he can beat anyone in the world, and he has the variety in his game to be able to do that. Of course, what we are seeing is that a lot of his big results are coming on clay. And I think, as Vanch says, that needs to be improved. And that, in terms of other surfaces that he can start to be strong on, especially the hard courts, are something he's going to have to target if he wants to, be breaking into the top. He's certainly into the top 20. I think he has broken into the top 20 at a point. But if he wants to get, I know a lot of people have been predicting that Musetti would be getting into their top 10 of their lists this year. If he wants to actually get there and to meet a lot of those people's predictions, those hard courts need to see improvements. It'd be interesting, because I've not actually had a proper look at him on the grass courts to see how he performs on grass. I think I'm hoping he'd be able to do something there, but I guess he's not going to be that good on that bit there. But yeah, like I said, it was not a great start to the year. He went onto the clay, of course, for the South American clays court swing. That didn't work out. He didn't get a single victory at all, and it just ended up probably being an expensive endeavour for him to go down there in the end, for no apparent reason. But yeah, inconsistency needs to be worked on so that you can really maximise that potential.
Yeah, for me, we talked about it, Vanch, I think, on the show that we did together last week, right? That's for me, his style is just always going to be a bit inconsistent. He just has so many different ways to win points, and just try guessing which one you should use right now. And I just think it's going to be very hard for him to produce consistent results, but certainly getting a quarter, getting a semi here is just really good. Again,
it was a good win against.
It
was a good win against Cameron Norrie, right? Because he was down a set, and I think some break points for Norrie to serve for the match.
He was also struggling with something. I think I can't remember what it was, but certainly felt like the Sinner withdrawal couldn't have come at a better time for him because of that. And then he actually gave a very good showing against Tsitsipas. And to answer sort of your curiosity, James, he has played 4 matches on grass in his career, and he has never won a set.
Cool.
It is a bit misleading, though, because the opposition was good. Fritz, Hurkacz, Bublik, and, Basilashvili maybe not so much, but...
they're good grass quarters. I mean, I think even Basilashvili actually has some form of grass court pedigree, so that's not too bad.
Yeah.
Well, not too bad in terms of it's not something we can look at. It's bad still losing, but it obviously needs to find some more ways of playing more on grass and getting at least okay draws.
Just not really enough experience, guys, is there anything else that we should talk about from Barcelona? I love that stat that 15 out of 16 seeds went to the third round. The one destroying this trend was Tiafoe against Rusufuori. But yeah, I think it all really paints a picture of just a pretty predictable event in that all the favorites went deep. The final was just as predictable as you would imagine, and of course the winner as well. So is there anything else, guys, that you want to talk about in terms of Barcelona?
Maybe Alejandro Davidovich Fokina getting to the quarterfinals, picking up some good wins, because obviously he did well last year in Monte Carlo and then this year in Indian Wells. So we know he can be a factor, especially on slow clay, particularly with his shot making and his explosiveness. I think it like his physicality as well really rewards the surface, and he's another guy who has a lot of tools as well. And actually, that was maybe Alcaraz's maybe dodgiest performance of the week.
Yeah,
certainly, right. It was a lot more up and down, a lot more breaks of serve. Certainly, wasn't as consistent from the baseline and stuff like that. And Davidovich Fokina certainly had chances in both sets, and it was competitive. But I was looking forward to that one. I sort of had that circled in my bracket before, and was hoping that he and Alcaraz would face each other. And I think it pretty much ended up being what we kind of expected, right? So, but yeah, hopefully Fokina can sort of carry this over and have another good showing at Roland Garros, because he made the quarters in 2021, and he's had, this is like where all of his best results have really come from. I mean, if you take out Monte Carlo last year, he was an under 0.500 player, right? So I hope we see more consistency from Fokina, especially because I think he has all the raw tools, and he's one of the fastest players on tour as well, right, Damien?
Davidovich Fokina, yeah, I just read in the chat that the WTA show that Nick hosts, by the way, all you guys can feel invited, of course, in the chat. And I just read that Nick is gonna do it with Rene Stops. Wow, that's quite something.
Nick Kyrgios has a coach?
I don't know.
I thought he was uncoachable.
Well, apparently Djokovic wants to coach him, according to Djokovic's last.
Djokovic wanted,
interview.
Ghosty says he's going to be
mind
doing
games?
some trolling, and he should. Come again?
Do you think that Djokovic saying that, if I coached Kyrgios and he won 5 slams is just sort of mind games at this point? Because he's suddenly become very buddy-buddy, then become very buddy-buddy, and, the relationship like 5 years ago, like Nick was just trashing Djokovic all the time.
I was listening to something interesting about that, where or I heard something interesting about that. It was, like you say, up to 5 years ago, Nick did not respect Djokovic, did not respect Nadal, did not respect Federer, and actually got good results against those players because he didn't respect them. He played his best when he went out and played against them. But Andy Murray, on the other hand, he had huge respect for because he was mates with, and he could never get a win against Murray. The thing is, it looks as though Djokovic looked at that and saw, right, I'm going to have to get pally with this guy if I'm going to be able to beat him. He got pally with him, and then all of a sudden, Djokovic is picking up the wins quite straightforwardly against.
Of course, some of that was also him supporting Novak in the whole deportation thing. Yeah. That might be part of it, but I think there's something there, James. I certainly think,
but did he ever say a word about Roger though? Like, he was always talking about Rafa and Novak, but Roger, I think he always respected.
I think Roger and Andy he respected. A lot.
I think this is what doesn't work. But also, you're saying that Kyrgios is picking. I mean, that he's losing to them now easily, and that's. I mean, they only played 1 match with Novak, right? So, and it was, I guess, just a phenomenal performance from Djokovic. But that's quite interesting for sure. I'm giving Ghosty in the chat definitely my blessing if he wants to troll Rene Stubbs tomorrow.
But Stubbsy is someone who doesn't take crap from anyone. So she's
I don't think she will care. I don't think she will care. I just hope he does his best. Let's maybe move on to let's start with Munich, okay, guys? Because I just read a phenomenal tweet from Botic van de Zandschulp that I want to just read out. The tweet is just 3 words, and it's "This one hurts." And this is what we're going to start with, I guess. The final, the unbelievable final. Holger Rune beating Botic van de Zandschulp. Did you guys, survive this? What was the state of your brain after watching this final?
I started watching in the 3rd set, actually, when Holger was down 5-2. And I think, he had Botic had 2 match points on his serve at 40-15, 5-2. And, I do want to give credit to Holger because I do think he actually played pretty bravely on a lot of these points. And he did come up with some goods, especially with his backhand drop shot. He kept the ball very deep. I think Botic just got so tight. At some point, he was not going for his first serve. He was just spinning in first serves routinely at 80 miles per hour and just hoping that Rune doesn't miss. And Rune is just too good of a player for that, I think, and I think just his forehand in particular, which is kind of a big take back and something that actually should work on clay. Like, he's had some of his best results, particularly at challenger level and also in Munich the last couple of years. But when he gets so tight and nervous like that, it just sits up in the middle of the box, just very easy to attack, and kind of Holger just could do whatever he wanted on some of those points. And man, you could just see the expressions in Botic's face. Like he had played so well to get those leads, especially the second set, and like even earlier in the match, like he definitely stayed with Rune the whole time, and then like to see him get so tight at the end, that was a bit tough, certainly to watch, because Rune was also struggling with his own physical issues with the ankle and stuff like that.
I was listening to the World Free commentary, it would have been, and one of the commentators said at that point, I think it was around about 5-4 in that service game that he had, that he basically called Botic an imposter with who was actually on the court at that point, who had been on the court for the last two and a bit sets before that. He just literally went unbelievably passive throughout the entirety of those games in which he was looking to serve it out, and you cannot go passive against Rune. He will just eat you up in the way he did. I think it didn't help as well, partly given the theatrics that Holger had when it came to his injuries. First of all, the shoulder, which then caused the injury timeout. Then he had it. Then he twisted his foot or his ankle at a point, shouting at the umpire, saying it's unfair. Why you let me go out when I twisted my foot? You're going to damage my foot, yada yada, and swearing and whatnot, and basically making it all about him. And it was a tactic which worked because it really did get into Botic's head. He wasn't able to serve it out. Rune was able to keep his level, whereas Botic fell away. And subsequently, Rune was able to defend his title, and Botic has missed out on his first ATP title. And it's such a shame when you see that happen, because in those situations you want the underdog to win. You want Botic to be able to go away and pick up his first title, but you have to keep on it. You have to keep your level there if you want to be picking up these titles and beating these top 10 players.
Yeah, 5-2 up with a double break. You think that he has enough of a cushion to fall back onto, even if he's, especially with the issues that you mentioned, the shoulder, also the ankle later, but it clearly wasn't enough. His mind, he just lost his mind, right? He was just playing it slow to the Rune backhand when Holger couldn't even produce a forehand for a while. And yet Botic just was avoiding that wing for some reason. But yeah, it happens, of course. We've seen that happen with players who are going for their first ATP title, and just a very dramatic way of. Usually, it's not that harsh, and definitely this one hurts. Is a tweet that we can we understand. This is like Kokinakis saying, what was that tweet from Kokinakis after the Murray loss? This sport sucks or something like that. Maybe
it's effing game or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. There was definitely a swear word in there, and this is very similar vibes to this for sure. And
it's one of the key things about this sport, and what sets it apart from the likes of football and whatnot is that you can't just sit back and defend. If a football team goes 1-0 up, they sit back and defend. 90 minutes rocks around and they pick up the victory. In tennis, you're not on the attack until the last point. You're not going to win. You're not going to win the game. There is no clock that's ticking down. It's you get into the X number of points before your opponent, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and whoever came up with the tennis scoring system. Whoever came up with the tennis scoring system is definitely a genius.
Isn't that like a popular tweet from yours?
That's why I can tweet, so I just
I thought so. Yeah. Also, what do you guys think in general about Rune? And we're also going to talk about Rune Banja Luka, I think. But what do you think about Rune even playing this event after making the final in Monte Carlo? Because right now with the shoulder issue, also maybe the ankle. Isn't it going to be a problem for Madrid and Rome? We don't know that, of course, but it feels to me like it was just stupid to even try it. Defending champion, I know, but he was already kind of out physically in Monte Carlo, right? And then he goes to Munich to fight for 250 points.
I'll let you go, Vance, first.
It's kind of a fair point. He picked up 600 points in Monte Carlo, and maybe at this point when you're just this young, you're sort of just chasing the ranking points, and you don't really trust that if you take a week off or something like that, you're going to be in tip-top shape for other tournaments, and you just want to keep playing and carry that momentum on. So it's a bit tricky because I guess in Madrid, we'll see if this is like actually something that bothers him in Madrid, but like at least being a seeded player, he should get like a few more days off, right? I don't think he'll play his first match until probably Friday
or Saturday, right? Yeah,
Friday or Saturday. So maybe that will end up being like enough time, and maybe if he keeps progressing, he gets days off in between the tournament. So with the 2 weeks, like that's a little bit more of a cushion, I would say. But yeah, definitely something maybe for him to look at in the future, like if he's ever in this position again.
I think it very much depends on which tournament do you absolutely want to play and want to make sure that you're good for as a warm-up tournament. And if you want to be good for Roland Garros, you need to play Rome. And if you want to play Rome, you cannot be playing 2 weeks worth of tournaments before Madrid, because you're going to go into Madrid, which both players look like they're going to be going into Madrid, and you end up going deep at Madrid. You are going to have absolutely nothing left to be able to play on the Rome clay. And as we know, the Rome clay is key to be able to actually know how to play on the Roland Garros clays in terms of as something that's most similar in terms of the way it's built up. If I was Rune, if I was Rublev, as soon as I got to that final on Saturday evening, I would have pulled out of both Banja Luka and also of Munich, because I would have needed that week plus a little bit more time to be able to get myself ready to go to Madrid to be able to fight for that Masters title, especially given as these two are going to be two people which are going to be contenders for that title. Now, it wasn't like a Davidovich-Fokina from last year where it was a slight fluke almost that he did get to the final of Madrid and of Monte Carlo, and that he could have played a week after, because he knew that his chances in Madrid and Rome were going to be quite slim at actually going any further. Both Rune and Rublev will be looking to get to at least the quarterfinals, if not further, in both Madrid and Rome. And if you end up doing that completely, you're going to burn yourself out massively when you hit Roland Garros, or you're going to be in a situation where you're going to go deep in Madrid and you're going to have to find yourself pulling out of Rome straight after and not getting that crucial experience on the Rome clay to be able to then take into Roland Garros.
Yeah, that was definitely true last year. I wonder if it's still going to be true with the 1.5 week Masters, though, right? Maybe now you can actually do it all. They basically get seeded players from here. They get like 5 or 6 days of rest. So maybe it's actually fine. Maybe after Rome, they get over a week of rest after Madrid. I mean, if they lose reasonably early. So I don't know. Maybe right now it's actually doable. But I think even
some players they feel like they have an obligation to play because maybe they were given a wild card earlier in the tournament, and so they kind of think, okay, yeah, this tournament is pretty special. Like I think because Holger, I don't know if this is actually true, but he asked for a wild card from Munich and they gave it to him, and then he said, you will trust me, you will not be let down. It'll be worth it. Give me a wild card. And then he got a wild card and he won the thing last year. And maybe he didn't know how deep he was going to go in Monte Carlo. And then once it was over, and then also you have the whole appearance fee thing. Maybe that's also sort of a factor in these players' minds. It's kind of a tricky one, because James also brings up a good point about getting burned out. I mean, essentially you could say that's what happened to Dominic Thiem. I mean, that's he's kind of the poster boy for this now, unfortunately, right? Because he used to play 30 tournaments every year when he was inside the top 8 in 2016, 2017, and he would just sort of play week after week. And in some ways, I would say Rublev is a little bit like that amongst the current players, but so it's definitely burnout is definitely a legit thing.
And I think with Rune, it's especially important not to overplay, because he has so much history with just physical fitness issues, right? And that's for me is just but yeah, maybe you're right. He actually did get a wild card. I checked that and last year, so maybe
I can appreciate the idea of a wild card, but given the fact that the way the tour schedule is now created, I mean, last year there was a 2-week gap between Monte Carlo starting and Madrid beginning, which meant that if you wanted to take a week off straight after Monte Carlo, you could, and then go to your 250, because I believe Munich was in the second week of that one. Subsequently, if you wanted to then go play Barcelona straight after Monte Carlo, you could then take the week off and then go into Madrid. There was that gap. I know what you're saying about the fact that it's now as a 1.5 weeks. I still think there's going to be a lot of physical exertion. You're going to be on the practice court. Some of them may enter doubles and may want to go a little bit further in doubles. We know Rune and Rublev like to play in the doubles circuit, so that's more matches that they could have under their belt. And at the moment, given the way that both players played, and given the fact that the injuries that are now being at risk to Rune, I would have them on high upset alert at the beginning of Madrid, just because they're going to be completely burned out when they actually arrive there and play their first match on a Friday and a Saturday. And it's also key to remember that they're not going to leave Munich and Banja Luka until late tomorrow afternoon at the latest. They'll have Tuesday, Wednesday, and possibly Thursday. If not, they're going to probably be stuck on a doubles match on Thursday if they've got a doubles partner. So they've only got a few days to get used to the courts there, and then they'll be straight into their contest. It's you realistically, as a player playing at that level, going that deep in tournaments, you need to have at least a solid week where you're not going to be doing any sort of major tennis, and you're just going to be doing normal things in the gym, resting, getting yourself ready, and then hitting Madrid hard.
There was also another question about the final where Ghosty said that his lady love told him that Rune was trolling a bit with the injury and MTOs, and he asks, is that right? I guess there are many opinions about it, right? Do you guys have any strong feelings about it? Like, something was clearly wrong in both cases. Was it a bit more theatrical than it could have been? Maybe.
Maybe sometimes he sort of feels like he's being wronged, maybe by the umpire or by the officials or something like that, and then that maybe rubs people the wrong way, or maybe the timing, like it was just before he was about to serve on one of the occasions, and it was maybe if it happens more than once in a set, like certainly some players, it'll be interesting to hear what Botic actually has to say, like about this final, like just his thoughts in general about the whole thing. I think maybe that's the most fascinating part of this whole final, was actually like what is like the sort of the psychology and everything going on in Botic's head, rather than like maybe the Rune theatrics. I'm not so sure. I mean, he's certainly going to be a player that divides opinion, like for a majority of people. Like they're in some ways it's maybe good for tennis, right? Because it's going to have more people talking about it, and people are going to
villains are good, right? Taylor Fritz said
and
that.
at least he backs it up with his game as well. Like he's if you're going to be arrogant and then you got to like really back it up. I think so far Rune has been able to do that, so that's at least something in his favor.
I think very much when it came to those two injuries and the theatrics, I do think the shoulder one was a bit of a bit theatrical. He was down in that game. He wanted to do something to try and disrupt Botic, and it kind of and unfortunately that didn't work. But I do think when it came to the twisted ankle, near enough, or the attempted twisted ankle, that was slightly unfortunate and unlucky, and he was sort of hobbling from that. But we did get a lot from Rune likes to shout on court and say whatever and whatnot, and it's good for us as fans watching it, because we get to be slightly more entertained, see what they're saying on there, seeing how they react and whatnot, because we just don't want two people that are very cut and dry in terms of they just do nothing, and their tones are exactly the same throughout the match, regardless if they're winning or losing. We do want to see some fight, or at least some aggro from them, so that we can really get behind that and get behind the story of that drama.
Mm-hmm. No, okay, yeah. Someone else, I guess, that we should talk about from Munich was Taylor Fritz. Even on again, I'm going to mention the show that we did last week, Vange, but of course, a lot of the topics were kind of similar. But we talked about sort of Fritz finally getting a full clay season, right? And he made another semi here. What did you guys think of like what he did this week? A bit of a struggle against Vujovic earlier, then of course a win over Team, and then the loss to Van der Zandschulp.
Yeah, the consistency is definitely there for Fritz, and it's transferred over to the clay. And obviously the win against Team was good, because Team is slowly starting to hit his forehand a bit better, I think, the last 2-3 weeks, and certainly a little bit closer, but obviously still not ready to beat a lot of the top 10 players, I think, Team. But it was very similar in the sense he had a great quarterfinal against, last week it was against Tsitsipas, this week against Team, and then sort of in the big points against Botic, Botic was a little bit able to expose the limitations, athleticism limitations that Fritz still sort of has in his game on clay, which he's kind of working through. But it's just like he didn't play the big points as well as he probably would have liked. It was kind of the same story against Rublev in the last 2 sets when they played in Monte Carlo. And I think Botic in general has been pretty tricky actually for Fritz. I mean, they played last year at the Davis Cup. That was more on a neutral surface, on a hard court, like sort of indoors, September. And it was a very similar type of match and scoreline. And I think, Botic has a lot of junk in his game that he's able to throw to a lot of different, particularly he's a guy who really plays well when he plays against players in the top 10. He has a pretty good record, and he seems to always be a little bit confounding. You don't quite know what he's going to do with his forehand. Is he going to be passive? Is he going to pull the trigger? It's a little bit like he keeps you on edge with his shot selection. So maybe I think Fritz would be a little disappointed in how he played the tiebreak and maybe there's some parts of the second set, but I think he'll move on. Like I think he'll probably, I still expect him to have decent showings in Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros. So from that standpoint, it's still overall a pretty positive week, right?
I think the overarching thing with Taylor as well is that saying that he put on the camera, which is USA clay, and the question mark when it comes to actually him and his ability to play on the surface. It's quite remarkable, really, that American tennis players tend to not be very good on clay, and for him to be as consistent as he is. And this is also very good for him in terms of if he actually wants to remain in the top 10 and to go a little bit further, is that he's going to have to pick up at least a decent chunk of points at events like Monte Carlo, like Madrid, and whatnot, so that he can maintain in those top 10 elements. And yeah, we've got a great action shot of him there sliding on the clay as he goes for the ball. And yeah, he's just proving to be a man of all surfaces, which is good for him and what's slightly good for American tennis.
Yeah, and also when it comes to Fritz, I've just noticed something. Do you guys know for how long the streak of him reaching a quarterfinal in an ATP Tour event is already? At least the quarterfinals, of course.
I know he didn't get to the quarters at the Paris Masters because Gilles Simon took him out. But I think every other event that he's played after that, he's done quarterfinal or better. I mean, at tour level, of course, if you take out Australia, right? But
I mean, I didn't. I actually was thinking of Australia, but you're exactly right. Yeah, since Australia, he also played the United Cup, but of course we can't recount it. The second round exit to Popperino at the Australian Open, and then he has a semi-final title, semi-final, quarterfinal, semi-final, which is just quite absurd. So
I think he's raised his floor, so his BC level is winning him a lot more matches than even last year, because last year he went on some good stretches, but then he had long injury layoffs, like the entire clay court season. He didn't, his foot was in a boot, and then like the start of the North American clay court season, he was injured again, and then of course no points for Wimbledon. That was true for everyone, but I think he's like backing up what he did last year, so that's good for American men's tennis. He's still by far the most consistent player, I would say, even more so than Tiafoe and maybe even Paul at this point, although Paul is pretty close this year.
And also, if he if you take out that Popperin loss and somehow put him in the semis where he would lose to Djokovic, let's assume that's what would have happened.
Yes.
Then he would have been fourth in the race, actually ahead of Sinner.
Yeah.
Which is just pretty crazy to think about. Right now he's at number 7 for anyone wondering. Okay. Weird players in the top 10 include Kachanov and Nori, but otherwise it's basically what the guys that you would expect. Anyone else that you guys would want to talk about from Munich?
I mean, O'Connell played a very good match against Zverev. I think I certainly was expecting Zverev and Rune to face off in the semis. So for O'Connell to get that win is pretty big. He seems to be another one of those players with I don't really think he's like Musetti. Like they both play pretty different in terms of their trajectory and of shots and stuff like that. But O'Connell is certainly capable of being a good disruptor, I think, for top players because of what he can do, especially with his backhand. He has decent amount of variety. I like the topspin when he has time. I think he serves pretty well. He's got a pretty well-rounded game. The consistency isn't always there week to week, but we saw, like, for instance, when he played Medvedev in one of those tournaments, I think Doha, he pushed him pretty hard. I think that was the hardest I've seen that Medvedev had to work to win any of those matches in that whole Middle East and Rotterdam stretch. So not much of a surprise, but I guess really good that he managed his nerves in the big moments and actually pulled it off.
I've got to shoot, but I will give you my player that I was looking out for. That I was quite pleased to see at least a better performance from, and I will say that as a Brit was Carl Edmund.
I think we know.
Yeah, it was Carl Edmund in his first round match.
Oh, my guess was different. Okay, never mind.
Okay, because Carl, came back from a really serious injury, which laid him off pretty much over the entire COVID period. And into the beginning bit here, Brilliant got the result straight up there. But he's been quite unfortunate when it comes to his protected ranking positions in terms of players he's been drawing in main tour events where he's just been unfortunately railroaded effectively, or at least it's been quite straightforward for the opponent to beat Carl. But in this game, Carl really showed a much more of a competitive edge, which was excellent to see, and was able to actually hang in there a lot more with Husler, who was a decent player, who's certainly a decent player, and for Carl to be able to take a set, to be able to keep it close, and realistically, he should have won that first set as well. There was a lot of chances that he had along there, and just as a Brit, I'm really pleased to see Carl starting to show a little bit more form as he's come back from the injury bit. But like I said, I've got to shoot off now, but it's been great being on, and I'll leave you to talk about Banja Luka.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't understand something, and then I was very confused by James. Yes. No, I actually watched Kyle Edmund the week before Munich in a 25K, and it was so fun to just see him on on the crappy ITF stream playing Lingua Lavaya and Erhard. That was just so weird and absurd. But yeah, back in the day, he used to be a fantastic clay player. Of course, that forehand that once took a set of Nadal, right? Just incredible topspin on it, and it fits the surface so well. But maybe maybe in his comeback, maybe in just a couple of in how slow it's been, maybe it's actually gonna be more helpful for him to play on something faster. But yeah, I didn't watch the Whistler match, so I'm not sure if there were like any good signs. But
Yeah,
James,
interestingly, as James was talking about Kyle Edmund, I immediately thought of Hyun Chung because they both made the semifinals of Australia in the same event, and so it's good to see that now they're at least both back on tour, because they were a pretty mainstay for 2018, 2019, and it seems like a different era altogether. But now they're back, so that's good.
You reminded me to check if they scheduled him for tomorrow, but they didn't. So it's probably gonna be Tuesday or maybe even Wednesday when Chung plays his first match against Jordan Thompson, of course, in the Seoul Challenger. Yes, I guess with that we could maybe lock up Munich and then just head to Banja Luka, where of course we had the one and only defending champion failing. It's not the same place, it's not the same courts, but still similar conditions, the same event basically. And Andrey Rublev lost to Dusan Lajovic in the final. Maybe the thing that we were talking about with Rune, do you think that it actually even made sense for Rublev to come to Banja Luka after winning Monte Carlo?
Not really. I think he should have skipped it, to be honest. After listening to James and also what actually ended up happening, didn't really make a lot of sense, for him to go and play there. I mean, he also in between, I think winning Monte Carlo and going to Banja Luka, he also attended a ceremony with Daniel Medvedev, right, as the godfather of his kids. So I think, it was going to be a lot to ask for him to go all the way here. He did have a chance, especially with Djokovic out, but yeah, I mean, he like we established earlier, he's kind of a player that just loves to play week after week, and probably saw another good opportunity to add to his collection of titles, and certainly maybe would have been better off skipping it, but nonetheless a very good week for Dusan Lajovic, right? I mean, I kind of
best
think of
of
the
his
high for
career
him being I mean, it's a valid question. Was it even better than 2019 Monte Carlo? Because he beat Medvedev and team on this run, but here he beats the entire Serbian Davis Cup team roster basically. and Rublev. I mean, actually the only one missing is Laszlo Gera, but he beat Laszlo Gera in Rio, so I guess this year he's beaten all of them. And
so is he undefeated against Serbians this year, 4-0? Should be, right? Yeah, from what I see, he should be. Yeah, I would actually put it over Monte Carlo. Of course, it's not as important ranking-wise. Of course, it's not as high profile. But for me, it was actually probably bigger. I know just to beat Djokovic and Rublev in the same week. Rublev of now, because he also beat Rublev on the way to his UMAC title in 2019, but that was still kind of different. I think Rublev was in fact 70 something in the ATP rankings or something like that. And of course, comparing these two titles doesn't really make sense. Banja Luka and UMAC. The UMAC one was one of the weakest in that year. Attila Balázs in the final, and I think that kind of says it all. Sorry to Attila Balázs. But never mind. That's a topic for another day. I wanted to start talking about protected rankings already. But no, as you said, I think for me, Rublev, Djokovic, beating them in the same week, showing a level that I didn't think he still had, right? I mean, he had a couple of good Golden Swing results, of course, which already was a surprise after his 2022 campaign when he was basically only getting results in challengers. Now he comes in 2013, good Golden Swing, and suddenly has this. Even if you actually thought that maybe he was gonna start declining, of course, the Djokovic loss looks a little. Well, the Djokovic win looks a little weaker in hindsight now that Nola has pulled out of Madrid. But still, probably the best week of Lajovic's career. Maybe a little bit of a shame he didn't do it in Belgrade rather than Banja Luka. I think it still must mean so much, right?
Right, yeah, and he was down 6-3 in that second set against Djokovic. Of course, Djokovic had a easy overhead and he missed a forehand, but still he had to hold his nerve, and he played really well in that match. Like even and then against Kecmanovic served for it, so it could have been straight sets Kecmanovic, and I think Lajovic showed quite a lot of grit and like really just played super well. Like I mean, we know what he's really good at. I mean, the clay gives him a lot more time, especially his topspin backhand is fantastic when he connects. I particularly like how easy his serve is. Like it's very he's very easy on the eye to watch. I think he's pretty well rounded, and he likes to come forward. He has good touch. He's can build points very nicely. His point construction is very good, and especially on slower courts, he has a lot more options. But he also has bread and butter shots that work really well, and he has a good kick serve. Like I feel like his game is pretty complete. I'm always kind of surprised when he's not producing results more consistently. Like especially last year was a real shocker for me. I really didn't expect him to go that far out, like be stuck on the Challenger Tour for that long. So it's nice to see that he sort of translated into more main tour results this year. I think those matches against Carlos were also maybe a learning lesson. He's lost to Carlos 3 times this year, but I think particularly the one in Rio, he actually played very well. Like it was very competitive. 2 sets made Carlos work really hard. So I think and then I think he went into Miami and had a good week there as well. He beat Andy Murray and he beat Cressy. It was not easy to play, of course, on any given day. So he's actually carried it over. I mean, in Monte Carlo, he didn't actually even qualify, but he ended up, getting into the main draw. And
did he lose to who did he lose to? Gakov? Was he one of the guys who lost to Gakov? No, he lost to Humbert.
Okay. Yeah, Humbert. Yeah, because Humbert ended up qualifying. Yeah.
Yeah, Matthew is giving us this point for the second time already here, so we should probably try to talk about it. He simply said earlier that Rublev needs a drop shot, and that the conditions looked very slow in the Banja Luka final today, and that even though that was the case, Rublev was still trying to power through the clay, and it didn't work. What do you think about that?
He got very impatient in the third set, especially. I mean, he started really just pummeling ground strokes. Wasn't really thinking very clearly. I think it might have been fatigue, might have been tiredness, but he really didn't he went down double break in the third set very quickly. And he gave Lajovic that extra bit of cushion. So when he did serve for it the first time and he got a bit tight, he had at least an insurance break and he was probably going to get the job done. But I think Rublev, sometimes in those moments, I think this is an interesting point actually, because it made me think that if you look at the top 10 right now on the ATP side, you have Fritz, you have even Sinner and Rublev, and those 3 guys, amazing ball strikers, but they don't really have a backhand slice. And I think in today's game, that could be a very useful, weapon to have in certain situations. Maybe even when you're tired and you want to throw different looks at your opponent, but also just generally, I think it'll help them a lot more on the grass and players like that. We were just praising Fritz's versatility, and I think Rublev is pretty versatile on all surfaces as well, and so is Sinner so far. But I think if they develop like a good backhand slice, that could be something that could make them even more dangerous, don't you think? And maybe it could help them in situations like this.
Yeah, not maybe necessarily the case with Fritz, but with Rublev and Sinner, I'm gonna mention that we talked about it on the show on your show last week, where we said that they have some sort of similarities in their game in how they are just very good ball strikers. Sinner, of course, the more explosive one, but still they are kind of similarly one-dimensional. And I think also Fritz doesn't fit into what I'm going to say right now, but both Rublev and Sinner, anytime they hit a drop shot, you just have the sort of idea that this is the first one they have ever hit. Like someone gave a racket to a kid.
I do think Sinner is using it a lot more, and he's thinking like it's more of a conscious thing in his brain now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I need to actually use the drop shot. He used it quite well in Australia for those 2 sets he won against Tsitsipas, and maybe at times against Alcaraz, I've seen him pull it out.
Tried against Medvedev in the final, but all of them. I honestly don't think there was a point that he won after a drop shot.
No. I think he was 0 for 7 on drop shots. I counted that in that match. It was not good, but I think this is kind of a valid point. It would have probably helped him out at certain points here, but if you're Rublev, I mean, if they play this match like 10 times, Lajovic probably doesn't win more than twice. But
It's not a
Yeah,
glaring
yeah.
issue here because,
Right.
as you said, like Rublev was still the big favorite, and most of the time he wins this. But for all power baseliners or however you want to call them, it should be quite obvious to try
Yes.
to develop a different way to finish the point. But
Right.
for Sinner, we can see he's trying. So you're
Yeah.
right, or maybe that's just something that he has, as you said. Rublev, probably not so much.
Yeah.
But again, you kind of have to question as well, like whether it made sense. You've just won 1,000. How motivated are you going to be for
Yeah.
the
There's not
weekend?
really
Like,
that much time also during the year to like really tinker and work around on these things, especially if
oh
you're
yeah,
playing as much as Rublev is, and also just like the week to week, like the rhythm between practices and matches. It just makes it really hard to like actually have a proper time off to like develop these things. And even the off season, maybe in the month of December, maybe after Wimbledon, but there's always some clay tournaments post Wimbledon as well. But yeah.
yeah. Frankly, after Djokovic went out, my expected finalist was Kecmanovic probably, and I guess that's true for
Yeah, mine
almost
too. I
everyone,
expected.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but as we said, he was actually up on Lajovic. Then I was involved in the match that we would call probably the most dramatic of the week. But right now, of course, Rune and von der Zandschulp came along.
What do you think about Kecmanovic? Like, what do you think he needs to do to, I think, get his game to the next level? Because we saw him really peak at this point last year, and also a little bit this year with like getting to finals and stuff like that. But like, do you think
Yeah.
he just needs a little bit more in these big matches? Like, he's good from the baseline, but he doesn't really like have a good transition game. He doesn't really like to finish at the net. So it makes it
And
kind of
that's
hard.
that's a problem for sure. Yeah, like I believe that last year, even when he had that purple patch, of course, there was that phenomenal match against Carlos Alcaraz, which, of course, we'll be mentioning probably until,
Until his whole career is over?
until
No,
we die. I
like-
don't know, until Kecmanovic retires.
Yeah.
But certainly against top players, he has looked kind of underpowered. He doesn't really have a consistent way to win points against them. Yeah, and even though his strokes are super sharp, there's just not that much he can do. The serve, when he was serving like he did in Estoril until the final, that's something, right?
Yeah.
Just get some points somewhere, get some free points, get some points. That's generally, I think, the case. Ghosty is asking who is Rublev's coach still, Fernando Vicente, right?
Yeah, still the same.
The former tennis player Ghost. You might remember him, I guess. I think that's how that's how old you are, huh? Anyway, yeah, what were we talking about? I just got lost.
Oh yeah, we were just talking about Kecmanovic.
Oh, Kecmanovic, yeah. It's super hard for him to find easy points, and that's just something that's been really hampering him in all the matches against top players, but the one against Alcaraz. But I guess you somehow just, sometimes you're gonna have that one insane performance, right? And it's not like he was winning easy points against Alcaraz either. He was just a ball machine.
Yeah.
So it's clearly not that easy for Kecmanovic to improve from here. I think he might be stuck, as this sort of top 30-ish guy, and that's of course fair. I mean, not everyone has more potential to go upwards, but I'm sure that's not something that he's going to be satisfied in, given how good he was in the juniors and etc. Was he the world number one? I think he was.
Yeah, I think he was junior number one, and he beat Tsitsipas in the Orange Bowl. I want to say 2016, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So given that, I think the expectations were definitely high, but for now it's really kind of hard to see him. Ghosty says meow meow rallies too much. But yeah, that's kind of related, right? He just doesn't have easy ways to win points. Even when he played, for example, Shellbike here in the opening round, it was just clear that he cannot really overpower this guy. So, he starts using his court craft, he starts using his variety, and the match gets tough for Kecmanovic, even though it theoretically shouldn't. Theoretically, the difference in class should be way too high, but that's just not how Kecmanovic operates, at least most of the time. In a story, we were just praising his serve, and for at least a few matches, he was really getting some insane results on serve, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe another player from Banja Luka that we were thinking is Borna Coric. He's really sort of fallen off, hasn't he? I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, his most notable result since winning Cincinnati is probably getting to the Vienna semifinal, where he lost to
And he also
Shapovalov.
beat Tsitsipas
Yeah.
there, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think the Tsitsipas match at the United Cup was one that, I'll always circle because he was up 5-2 in the third set, and Tsitsipas had a lead, and then George had the lead, and then he wasn't able to close it. So, but really, like since then, there hasn't been. I mean, he's on a 6-match losing streak or 5-match losing streak, something like that. And then at one point, he was up against Medvedev. I want to say in the second set in Dubai, and then he lost 21 points in a row. And I think since then, it's really kind of gone downhill. Like he lost to Mochan in Indian Wells,
And against Eubanks, he was also up, right? He was
he was up a set in a break.
3-1.
Yeah, right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And against Eubanks, if you're up a set and a break, you really should be finishing the match. I think you're right that that Tsitsipas match at the United Cup made us think that he's gonna have a good year, because there was just nothing to suggest otherwise, and then it was just straight up downhill. Kind of hard to say. He had a couple of these good weeks last year, which one of them was Cincinnati, Vienna as well, and also the challenger he won in Parma, where he just served like Borna Coric never served in his career, even before the injuries, and also he was hitting his forehand so well, somehow injecting pace out of it, but it didn't last. He's still almost in the top 20, right? But of course, that's not really gonna hold up after Cincinnati. Right now in the ATP race, by the way, what would be your guess where Coric is?
Let me guess. I want to say like 90.
Yeah, 96.
Oh my goodness, I was close. Okay, yeah, that's what it feels like, because like where are the points? It's there's not that many.
That's a very good guess, but also quite shocking still to see him there. Yeah, like for Dubai quarters, right? He must have gotten like 90 because it's a, and I guess for the United Cup also a fair amount.
He tends to do well on the faster surfaces, and you wouldn't normally expect that, because I mean his first title came in Omagh, was it? Like he won his first title in, was it 2017? No,
2017, but it was Marrakesh.
Marrakesh, okay, yeah, one of those, yeah. So
but he actually has a hard court title, a grass court title, and a clay title.
Yeah. So like all his best results have come on the faster surfaces, like Halle, where he beat Zverev, and then he beat Federer in the final.
Federer,
and then Cincinnati, obviously, and then even Shanghai in 2018. He had a really good run there, beat Federer again. So like,
seems like he just has a couple of these opponents that he always does well against, and mostly that's Federer and Tsitsipas. And whatever his form is, he's just gonna always trouble these guys. Of course, Federer not anymore, but it makes sense, right? They play tennis somewhat similarly, so it makes sense that he would be some sort of a kryptonite for Tsitsipas, especially the last couple of matches. Anything else that we need to talk about? We've got 1 hour and 12 minutes. Usually that's more or less where we finish, but if we have anything to talk about, of course, there's no time limit here. Jane also asked, has Coric been good on clay? I don't even remember. Like, not his best, but he had some fine results, right?
I think there was one year where I expected him to get to the fourth round, and he lost a close match to Struff.
11-9 to Struff, 2019 Roland Garros.
Yeah, that was the third round, I believe, and then he would have faced Djokovic, so that probably would have been the end of that run. But
that's the same year that when he also played Federer in that Rome match, which was quite famous as well.
He had 2 match points there. And,
so definitely not weak on clay. Like that's not really something you would say, but also probably not his very best, but nothing exciting. Did you guys discuss the whole Rune medical timeout thing? Yes, we did. Basically said that the shoulder, he was clearly hampered. He couldn't hit his forehand for a while. Painkillers kicked in. That was fine. Then he had the ankle. Tough to say how much of a sprain it is, right? We're just gonna know. Anxious for opinions. I think James was like a bit more stern in his Rune critique in terms of that than we were. But it still like wasn't why he won the match. He mostly won it because Botic and the Zandschulp just totally lost his mind, and of course 4 match points as well on return, right? And that fourth one was so incredible. That was the one that he finished with a volley on top of the net.
Yeah, that was a really beautiful point by Rune, honestly.
Yeah. there was like a big shot that Botic just got over the net, right? And a couple of errors as you would expect as well on the other ones. Also, Matthew has some question to you. Tell us the truth now. How did you tweet that stat about Lajovic winning his last match against all those top players?
Oh yeah, no, I mean I just remembered because I remembered he beat Rude last year in Madrid. I remember now you have Rublev. This year he already beat Murray. Medvedev, I remember he beat him in Rotterdam, and I don't think they played since. And then and then I remember the team Medvedev wins in Monte Carlo, and so like, I mean that's most of the list right there. And then most of those wins have come this year or last year in Rude's case, so it's kind of yeah, like it's kind of apart from Alcaraz, I guess. And I was looking at the most recent Slam champions. Most of these guys have won a Slam and they're active players. Pretty much only the exception of Nadal and Alcaraz, he's beaten everyone else on that list. So he definitely is very good on clay. Like that's where most of his top wins have come.
Yeah, Mafia just said, "Wow, impressive." that's very weird, Vansh, but it's still impressive. But also, like, how? But okay, that's I guess just well, that makes you who you are. Just like for Carlos Alcaraz, it makes him who he is. These these incredible gets make him who he is. As we said in the beginning.
Sometimes they just randomly strike. Like I'm just brushing my teeth and I'm just like, wait a second, him. Okay, wow, that's cool. I'll just tweet it. Literally, sometimes it's just that.
Okay, I guess that's a nice thing to finish on. Jane also said that she was anxious to hear our opinions and that she's gonna go back to listen, which we're gonna allow her to do. By finishing the show right now.
I think we covered
James.
it all. This was quite.
We did, yeah,
definitely.
We definitely did 3 events this week. Of course, I'm actually not sure if it's gonna be because it's called ATP Weekly. So is it gonna also happen during Madrid? I have no clue. I have to ask John about that. So not telling you guys that I'm gonna be back with probably with Mario, but we'll see next week for Madrid because I'm not sure if we're gonna be back next week, but we definitely will in 2 weeks' time. So anyhow, thanks Vansh for being here with us. Also thanks to James who already left. And it was fun talking about Banja Luka, Barcelona, Munich, and see you next time on some other Talking Tennis show. And also, feel invited to the WTA Weekly of Nick with Rene Stubbs, especially if you want to catch some trolling in the chat. Maybe I'm going to create a fake account and also help out.
Okay. I actually didn't. I completely misheard you. I thought you said that Rene Stubbs is coaching Nick Kyrgios. I didn't know you meant Nick. I didn't know you meant Nick from Talking Tennis. Okay.
Okay.
That's
because
really
you said that. Yeah, me too. You said that, and you said like I don't understand. I said something like I don't understand, and I didn't know if I didn't catch a reference or something.
Okay. That makes sense.
I never made the connection between Nick and Nick. That this is what you might have.
I thought because Australian coach
makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. No, it's gonna be Nick Carter and Rene Stubbs tomorrow on the WTA Weekly, not Nick Kyrgios and Rene Stubbs. But anyhow, on that very funny note, thanks guys. And I think John is not there, so I'm just gonna end the broadcast myself. And see you on some other shows.
Yep. Thanks.